Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome to Passing Dimes. My name's Josh Nickel. Joining me, Dallas Keith. Good. You?
I'm doing phenomenal. Possibly one of my favorite guests is on the pod today. Literally, I cannot be happier about this episode.
You're giddy about it. I'm excited because you're excited.
I am fired up. I've been trying for this guest to be on the pod, and it's finally happening. She's here in the flesh, and I don't really know what to do.
Let's get into it. So let's do the back and forth thing. So, at the start of the season, was #1 team ranked in the world.
I think it was the first multi-medalist for Canada in beach volleyball.
Yeah, I did my fact checking. She's won 6 tournaments. That's pretty good. A lot of podiums there.
Yeah,
that includes a 1440, includes an Orsika, and that includes some FIVB. So, bam.
FIVB Defender of the Year 3 times running.
National champion, can't forget that. Anyone who was at Nationals this year probably saw the plaque that's staying at Bombay Beach Club. Her name's on it.
I think a few times.
Just once. A long time ago.
Jim, the intern, had to check that real quick.
I got too good getting one fact correct. That's about my limit for an episode.
And was a dominant indoor player. Won a OUA championship with the University of Toronto Varsity Blues.
I mean, there's too many accolades here. Former top scorer at the University of Toronto.
You know, let's just bring her in. Let's start talking to her. It's Heather Bansley, everybody!
Yeah!
Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
It's really nice to be here. It's nice to see Dallas again. It's been a while.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
It's been too long. I've been hounding you to get on the podcast for, I think, years now. Finally, you're here.
I'm here, yeah.
This is really why we started the podcast, so you could still talk to volleyball people now that you're a big shooter, leaving the volleyball world.
Yeah, I had this stunning desire to need friends after I retired, so this is probably the best avenue I had to being like, hey, want to hang out?
We can put it on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I got this job talking into a microphone. I think you can be part of it.
So anyways, back to you. How is your season going so far? Let our listeners in. Where are you in your season? What's next?
So we're kind of winding down the season. We've got just a couple tournaments left. Brandy and I head to Rome on Sunday for the World Tour Finals. And then we've got a World Olympic qualifier in China after that. And then our last event of the season will be FIVB 4-star in Mexico in November.
Nice, and you won that one last year when it was a 3-star, right?
Yeah, we did. It was our last tournament of the season last year, too. We had played Vegas and Mexico back-to-back, won both of those, so it was a really, really great way to end the season. So,
what's it like being in Mexico with crowd favorite Brandy Wilkerson?
Everybody wants to marry Brandy in Mexico, so she gets tons of fans. I mean, I'm just like kind of there as well, so I get to like feel like they're also cheering for me, but it's mostly for Brandy. But it's good. I'll take it.
It's the Brandy show.
Yeah.
No one's named their club team after you yet?
No, definitely not.
Someday. I think we talked to Brandy about this. That's when you know you made it, when somebody's named their youth volleyball team after you as a person.
I think when you see people wearing your old sports bras or you have like signed caps or whatever, I mean, that's cool. Having banners up in like the 5-star venue is cool, but having an academy team named after you, I mean, that's...
You've made it.
Yeah, that's a celebrity amongst celebrities.
So you mentioned World Tour Finals. I think you've played in every one since they announced this format, but this year it's different, right? It's basically a 5-star this year. It's not like an invitation only, battle it out for a lot of money. Like, there's points on the line. There's a draw of 32 this year, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be the same as a 5-star. So they have a qualifier and then a full draw of 32. In the past, it's just been your top 10 to 12 World Tour teams. So it's a different format. I think it's a different promoter. It's not going to be a major series event, and so it's then they're counting it towards Olympic qualification, and then there's points awarded to it. Whereas in the past, it was just a tournament for lots of prize money.
Right, so you've been on tour. Dallas is just pulling up your BBB, since probably, it says 2007, but I think that was a youth event, so...
Hey man, youth events still count.
They definitely do.
Don't take away a quarter of my career.
So let's do it. Let's call it over a decade. Can you just explain to our listeners kind of the intensity that comes with Olympic qualifying versus say like a year after the Olympics where points aren't on the line, like the prize money might go down. Like what really changes in terms of like intensity, the amount of teams who are out there, like new partnerships, things like that?
Yeah, it's kind of the cycle of the quad, of every quad, I would say. So yeah, the year after the Olympics, like you said, it's generally people are less stressed for sure. You're not, so worried about accumulating those Olympic ranking points. And, there's a lot of people maybe taking time off or being a little bit more selective with the tournaments that they're going to play. It's just definitely more relaxed. Or people are, especially on the women's side, taking time to have a family. So, and then as you get, especially once the Olympic qualification starts, those 2 years prior, it's a lot. Just everyone's kind of like keeping track of everything, checking the ranking every week, keeping track of the points, calculating everything. And I mean, I'd say it's just, you're stressed until you know 100% that you've qualified. So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask this: do you sort of take part in that point tracking as well? I know that, you just alluded to it, right? Like people are so fixated on, I'm going to lose this event, I'm going to gain this, like sort of weighing your options. If I play this event, I'm going to drop this, or I have to, place a certain ranking in order for my points to go up. Do you find yourself doing that, or you just sort of go, hey, like I know my schedule as I know it, and this is what I'm going to do?
I think it's sort of a juggle of both because, early on in the season, I think when you're in the chunk of tournaments, especially with the world championships and the 5 stars, you're like, well, I'm playing all of those no matter what. It gets to a point when maybe there's some tournaments that are back to back and you need to take some a period of rest, or maybe you just near the end of the season need some time off. That's kind of when I think we'll be a little bit more calculated in what we do. And then also it depends if you're where you are, right? If you're not worried about dropping down into the qualifier, or if you're okay with where your ranking is at, then you're not always having to kind of consider okay, what's our ranking point or what's our entry points, and calculate it that way. But yeah, it's but there's you have to do it because there's the 5 stars and the 4 stars and just the makeup of the tournament. So if you're gonna, you could play a 5 star in the middle of the season, and then if there's a 3 star near the end, you don't necessarily want to play that 3 star if you're dropping your 5 star
right.
point. So I would say kind of you have to play that game, and it's unfortunate because you kind of want to just go and play and be able to play everything, but I think that there is an element of that all teams kind of have to consider.
Now, did you notice that with the structure that was before? I'm fumbling around my words because you're intimidating me so much. But
you're doing great, Dallas.
Thanks. It's my first time.
And you look good. You got jeans on. I don't know if I've seen you in jeans. You're a whole new man.
I'm literally a whole new man. I'm doing a triathlon, not a big deal.
What?
So what I'm trying to say, back to volleyball, is you've been around to see everything, right? When you started playing, there was Satellite and Challenger Series, and there's Open and Grand Slams, and now there's the Star System. Do you think there's more sort of manipulating draws now that there's so many different styles of tournament, as opposed to Grand Slams are big money, big points, Open is sort of the way to get into the Grand Slams?
Thanks for dating me. That was really nice. Yeah, I've been around forever. I'm not sure because, to be honest, when I first started, I wasn't at that point where I was calculating to get I was just playing. I was so new. I was in the qualifier, dead last sort of thing. So it definitely took some years for me to get to a point where I was okay, I gotta kind of consider this. But I think especially more now because if I'm remembering correctly, there was a point like the challengers and satellites, the top 32 teams in the world, or there was a cutoff where the teams couldn't play that.
Right.
But now you could have everybody entering in anything from a 1 to a 5-star. So you, so I think it was maybe like a little bit more controlled, but also I think in the last few years there's been fewer events, and the prize money has really dropped kind of like from what it was.
Right.
So I think teams are just trying to play more tournaments, and so I think there will always sort of be that element.
Right. I'm glad that you talked about sort of your struggles, because I think, and Josh, you can probably attest this too, I think when you and Brandy sort of reached that number 1 status, people were like, oh, they came out of nowhere. And you've been doing this sorry to date you again, but you've been doing this since essentially 2008, right? Like, you've been doing this a long time. You've been through the thick of the qualifiers, through the thick of, like, you know, getting top 10 finishes, working your way up to the podium. Like, I know that Jamie and Christina can sort of take the record of being the first gold medal team, but I think you were the first one to really sort of lock, stock, and barrel, like, sort of 2014 on, really solidify yourself as, like, I'm an FIVB medalist. Like, I'm expected to win a medal every tournament I play in. But what do you think of that? Like, do you think people sort of didn't give you enough credit when you became number 1, in the sense that, like, you're not an overnight success. Like, you really worked for everything that you got, and that's super, you know, I admire that more than anything else.
I'm not really sure. I think for me it was more focused on kind of like what me and Brandy were doing, and not necessarily, I guess, like taking it's great when, you know, to know that you have supporters and followers, but also I think we always kind of kept in our bubble, like me and Brandy and our coach Leonard, just always knowing that, you know, just feeling and setting goals for our team that, like, we have more to do, and I think a big goal for us has always been to be consistent, and like you said, I mean, Brandy and I were, like, you know, last year was our second season together. It was pretty new team, and in the beach volleyball world, but yeah, I have been playing for so long and working so hard, and so I you know, I've developed as a player, and I still feel like I have so much more to give and to do, and I think with Brandy, you know, it's just that team thing, and I mean, she's you know, she's younger than me, and then also started, if you look at maybe the development of sort of athletes in general, I would, like, you could say she started late, but yeah, I think we just kind of focus on our own thing, and not, I mean, it's, yeah.
I think the term "the process" kind of gets overused in sports a lot, but I do want to kind of go back to when you and Liz, I think you took a 9th in Phuket the one year. You did probably the best of the women's team at the Quebec Open. When you're kind of in the process, do you need, I guess, evidence to kind of prove that you're on the right path? Because it's hard in beach volleyball. If you're not winning tournaments, people don't think you're being successful, but you actually got like a bunch of top 10 results. You were constantly climbing the ladder. Like, what would you tell one of our younger listeners about, like, you can still kind of play the way you want to play and improve, but not be winning medals, right? Yeah. Like, how would you kind of describe that process that you knew you were getting better, even though, like, there wasn't the evidence of a physical medal, right?
Yeah, I think that kind of ties into sort of like what Dallas was asking. Like, you as an athlete, you really, and especially like a Canadian athlete, you really only recognize what, you know, when you're winning a medal. So when you're, like, you know, first, second, or third. And I think the best example is if you are, you know, if you finish 4th at the Olympics, that still is a really huge accomplishment, but you probably don't get any recognition for finishing 4th. And so, as to sort of relate that to beach volleyball, I mean, like, you could be on tour and you could be having these good results. You could be finishing 5th, just losing in the quarterfinals, which is, you know, like, as an athlete, as you're developing, that's, you know, you're getting closer and closer, but nobody's recognizing that. Nobody's seeing or hearing about your 5th place finishes, for example. So I think I would say it's like a personal motivator. It comes down to, you as an individual. Like, what are your goals? What are your team goals? And I mean, you're not always going to be recognized for what you're doing. That's just sort of like the nature of our sport, the nature of like our sport in Canada, especially. So I think you kind of have to be able to look at yourself and like I said, like set those goals and see, you know, how you're progressing or what you're doing. I don't think anybody is playing beach volleyball to, you know, to be recognized or like it's everyone's like self-driven here, especially in Canada. So yeah.
Nice. And we talked to Brandy about this, but one thing that I admired about your game was this winter you guys were both located in Toronto, and I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that you trained by yourself a lot. Like it was you, Brandy, and Leonard. Best team in the world training by themselves most times. And Brandy admitted on our show that she was ready to take a trip at one point during the season just to break up how tedious it was getting. How did you deal with that in the summer where you guys obviously set some goals, but what was it like showing up every morning at Downsview knowing that like there was going to be not a lot of external focus because there's no gameplay, you're not getting lost in like a competitive thing, it's going over the process again and again. Like how did you manage kind of those expectations?
I'm sorry, no, you can't practice with that.
Well, give yourself some credit first, Josh. You were there helping us out in a lot of practices.
Big plug.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging to be practicing at Downsview, you know, in this warehouse, staring at the same, like, dirty white wall, over and over, doing the same sort of, like, repetitive drills over and over again. And, yeah, it's not the same as, you know, traveling around the world, being outside, being in the sun, but I think that we knew that it was an investment sort of in our development as athletes, that it was, you know, a big thing that we wanted to work on some technical skills with Leonard, and for me personally, I think it was really nice to be home for a chunk of time, like be in Toronto. I've been in the sport for so long, and a lot of my time has been spent abroad, and I think I just can appreciate living in my own space, living in my own city a little bit more. But yeah, it definitely, like, you know, at a point you kind of like just get so exhausted and tired of doing the same thing over and over again, and you know, you're itching to compete, you're itching to get out and play with some of the world's top teams. So yeah, we did that. We went to California and had some training camps there, which I think helped break it up. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a commitment. Definitely a commitment. So yeah,
there's nicer places in the world than the full-time training center.
But it's home now. It's home.
For sure, it's home. It's home. So.
I was happy to move out of the house.
Dallas kind of touched on this earlier, just with the success you and Brandy are having and how expectations can change. Do you still get like a rush when you make a quarterfinal, or is it just kind of like, no, quarters are part of it, we're going to semis, we're going to the podium? Like, is there still, like, do you remember the first time you made a quarterfinal? Like, do you still get that giddy and excited about it, or is it kind of like, this is where we belong?
Yeah, it's I think it's kind of a mixture of both. I think sort of how experience has sort of taught me to be really, like, thankful for you know, getting to that point, but then still wanting more. I think yeah, and I think you kind of need a mixture of both. Like, you've got to stay motivated, but you can't be you know, so cocky and ahead of yourself that you can't appreciate of where you, like, of what you've kind of accomplished to get there. And I think this season especially has sort of taught me that you know, we haven't had the results that we've you know, that we set for ourselves, the goals that we set for ourselves. So it's I think just feeling really, like, thankful and excited, but still definitely hungry, you know, when we get into those quarters and those semis.
Really fires me up to listen to you talk, because it's like you've been doing it for such a long time, but you're always talking about, like, development and investing in yourself and getting better, and it's like, shit, like, now I want to get back playing, because, like, I don't feel as though I've invested in myself properly, or, like, no, but it's like, it's sweet to hear that, like, you've obviously reached the highest pinnacle of the sport, but you're like, no, I can do so much more, and there's so much like untapped potential that I have in myself and this team. And God, Heather, it's about time you came on this podcast.
Fire me up, Dal. That was
Oh, wow. Thanks, Dallas.
No,
I
usually
don't
your
know if
hot
you're
takes.
into it or if you're
no,
asleep.
I'm so fired up,
Good
and it just reminds me of like, you know, I was fortunate enough to travel with you in Brazil when you guys won a bronze medal, and that sort of pole vaulted you guys into your world #1 ranking. But like, you know, Josh, big shout out to Heather for being such a wicked teammate. Like, totally stayed, watched my qualification match, like talked to me after on the shuttle bus, like went out to lunch, went out to dinner, like totally didn't big league me and say like I'm way better than you, check out this medal. Like, you know, that's where we became friends, Heather.
It is. Well, I mean, you got your family, your Canadian family when you're on the road, and I think having been on the road for so long, that's you're around these people so much that, you know, you're away from home, you're traveling with these people, you get to see some pretty incredible places and kind of share these memories. So it's, I think I've really gotten to a point where I can appreciate those times sort of in between matches, and I think really, I remember coming into the sport and kind of coming a little bit full circle, but when I first started, I remember like Annie Martin, watching her play with Marie-Andre, and just like admiring them so much, and I think having them, you know, welcome me to the tour and support me and my partner at the time, Liz, and so I think that's kind of like a really like a bonus, I would say, to being on tour, is that we have such a big contingent, and that you can spend time and go out for dinner and drinks and like celebrate with the people and have those people around you, and like really develop some special friendships on the road.
If nothing else comes out of this episode, I want people to know, especially younger athletes, Heather is approachable. And speaking from someone who was horrifiedly afraid of you for years, because so intimidating watching her do like double body squats and like just like, oh shit, Heather, clean that. And it's like, I remember taking the bus home from you, like, hey Heather, like I worked out beside you too, but like now we have this like, oh, like, hey, like we're buddies and friends. It's like, I encourage everyone, and now you're gonna get mobbed like the celebrity you are. People, talk to Heather. So much information is in that head of yours.
Anytime, you're welcome to talk to me.
She's looking directly at me when I see.
If Dallas can talk to me, anybody can talk to me.
Well,
This is great, because usually your hot takes are like negative and like kind of ranty, where Heather's positivity is just like taking over the Passing Knives headquarters, where you're so fired up right now that it's good.
Some
you hear
people,
that, Dallas? We're a good team.
right? I was about to take a hot take there, but I think that one will come off the record.
Is that important to you? I guess you've been on the Canadian national team for a while, and you went to, was it U21s you went to Diane with?
Yes.
See, we both had to think about that for a while.
Such a big deal, she forgets.
I knew it was Diane, but I had to remember if it was under 21 or under 19, but it was under 21.
Do you think it's important to kind of welcome people, that there are people out there like Dallas who have weird expectations? Like, do you find it that when you walk by like a first year on the national team, like they don't want to make eye contact with you, they don't want to interrupt your lift? Like, is there a certain team dynamic that people have to get used to when there's such various levels, I guess, within the national team?
I mean, I've heard a lot that I'm unapproachable, or intimidating is the word.
I'll give you intimidating. Unapproachable, I don't know.
You're pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know what people are talking about. I don't know what 2014 Dallas was thinking.
You're a new man now.
Yeah. I wear jeans.
I think, I sympathize. I get it. I think there's sort of that hierarchy on a team. Like, you know, even in university, you know, have your first years and your fifth years, and it's just, you know, especially for people who are new to the program and coming in and kind of trying to find their place on the team. But I think a lot of it, you know, for me as an athlete, you know, I spend a lot of time, training outside of Toronto, so I wasn't necessarily around a lot. So maybe people wouldn't get to know me, or just being a senior athlete. Oftentimes, the senior athletes are a little bit separate from the development athletes. But I think, like Dallas said, I think one of the biggest, what a great resource on the team is talking to some for younger athletes, talking to the older athletes, and asking questions. And I know when I first started out, it's okay, I'm going on tour. I don't have a coach. I'm having to plan all this travel. What's asking the other athletes for advice. And I think that's everyone's just happy to share information. I think, and so yeah, I would say men, women, reach out.
Some people are happy to share information. Friend of the show, Aaron Nussbaum, kind of got on me a little bit when I asked him a secret question the other day. His answer was, "You should know this," and then he gave me the answer I eventually wanted. But some people are a little surly, I'd say.
Guy makes one multi-sport games, all of a sudden he's a big shooter now. Speaking of fourths,
we can't all know everything about volleyball.
If you have a point question, I think Cam Whelan or Aaron Nussbaum are the guys to go to.
I think Aaron thinks he knows the answer to every question. Except for fashion. Take that vest off, Aaron. I know you're wearing it. It's almost September.
He did tell me he was wearing a vest the other day.
See, I'm in his head. I already know. The guy dresses like he's in an LL Bean calendar or a catalog. Still love him though. Stupid best friends. Carry on, Josh.
Sure. You mentioned in Canada you don't get recognized too much, obviously, unless you're an Olympic medalist or anything. I want to touch on 1440 a little bit. I know it's not happening this year, but do you feel like that was a step in the right direction to kind of make it a festival feel? I feel like Carrie and Casey definitely promoted players a lot. You could play with different countrymen, so it wasn't even a country versus country thing anymore. You guys actually went and won San Jose, and I believe, did you play in another one?
Las Vegas was, P1440 was the promoter, but it was a FIVB event, but it was sort of fell under the P1440 umbrella of it.
Do you think that festival feels the step in the right direction for our sport, or how would you kind of address the issue where in Canada, I don't know, let's pop off a number, we probably have 100,000 kids across the country playing volleyball, maybe touch more. Even in Ontario, there's at least 10 or 12,000 if you count high school and all that stuff.
Josh, you should know that.
I should know
that. Aaron would be upset.
I would text somebody who would say, you should know this.
You should know that.
Anyways, do you think that's the best way to get people recognized, is to turn it into bring your family, bring your kids, there's stuff to do all day, you get to talk to the players, they're showcased. Is that maybe what our sport's missing in Canada, is just the way to approach people like Dallas was afraid to in the weight room one day? Do tournaments need to start having that feel?
I think any promoter, I'll start by saying this, any promoter looking to sort of further the sport of beach volleyball, I am a fan of. I will get behind. And sort of what P1440 was doing and what they're still doing, they're not having any tournaments this year, but they are investing a lot in the development of some of the, and especially athletes coming out of the NCAA and helping them kind of make the transition to full-time. I guess my answer is I don't know. I don't know what the best way to necessarily promote the sport in Canada would be. I think I really like the idea of having it as part of something else where you can there's tagging on. I think their whole idea was okay, we could get festival goers or concert goers to come and watch beach volleyball and and vice versa kind of thing, and trying to get new crowds of people, new fans to the sport. I think our sport in general is pretty the athletes are pretty approachable. You come to any kind of venue and the athletes step off the court or walking around. You can go to oftentimes there's a mixed zone, and but even just walking around the venue, the athletes are there. You go watch a game, other athletes are there watching, and I think that's something that's kind of neat about our sport, especially as maybe some kids coming to watch or can have that opportunity. But I think anytime there's an opportunity to individually promote an athlete, it is great and recognize some of the athletes. But I mean, if you're asking about what's the best way to have a tour in Canada, I don't have that.
You should
I
know
don't
the
have an
answer
answer
to that.
Yeah, but you should talk to Aaron because he probably has the answer.
All right, he's been getting enough airtime on this episode.
So Dallas and I were speaking at the beach one night before we were passing times, creators. But we were overheard speaking about I don't know, what's going to be the method? And just this person we didn't even know turned and looked us dead in the eye and just blanked, just sponsors.
So Josh.
Oh, that's the thing we haven't thought of.
Josh didn't do this story enough justice, and I do want to be on the record of saying this, and I want you to hear this. But we were sort of going back and forth, and we were talking. I was talking about my experience with playing and talking to the promoters in Australia and being like, oh, it costs this amount of money to run a 2-star, it costs this amount of money to run a 4-star. And I just sort of shot from the hip, and I was like, how do you make money as a beach volleyball promoter, right? There's no revenue from ticket sales. There's no real, other than the 5-star, there's no real revenue generators in terms of merchandise. And we were sort of spitballing back and forth, just be how do you make money? And out of nowhere, I had no idea who this person is. Still have no idea who this person is. She looks at us and she goes, sponsors. And she leaves. And I just turned to, and she doesn't even wait for an answer. It's just, she looks at us, she goes, sponsors. And I turn to Josh and I go, oh, of course. of course. How could I forget sponsors?
I think of nobody's thought of that.
And
so the next day we called Kellogg's and we started our own professional beach volleyball tour because sponsors.
Yeah. You know what? I only use Apple products because sponsors.
That's why this podcast makes so much money.
Yeah.
Sponsors.
Oh my god. And then, you know what? For the running joke was whenever we didn't know a question, it was sponsors. Yeah, okay.
I knew we'd get a hot take this episode. I didn't know I was going to cause it, but...
Heather didn't just come on a weekly basis. It really smooths me out here. I'm not firing at the hip as I usually do.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
I don't know.
I feel like I got this off the rails.
Just having too much fun over here.
I'm just kind of going down my list. The other question I wanted to touch on was U of T kind of your first experience with beach volleyball? There's been a lot of people come out of that. We talked to Sophia Courier and Alina Dorman who are there now. It sounds like Alina's hooked. If Sophia didn't have a day job during the day, she would be hooked too. But was the U of T Beach Club kind of the start for you to realize that you could go to Youth Worlds and compete and be on the national team? Or were you playing in Waterdown, Ontario when you were growing up? What was kind of the spark for you?
Yeah, I had played a couple kind of OVA tournaments in the summer prior to going to university, but I'm gonna date myself again, and they didn't have the beach club when I was in university.
Ooh. You know what they didn't have? Sponsors.
Yes. But I mean, it wasn't anything formal like they have now with their training groups, but at the time, Christine in the summer would lead practices, and then a lot, if not almost a majority of the team would be playing in the OVA tournaments throughout the summer, and so we would always kind of have a training group, and then there was kind of through my teammates at U of T got sort of connected with some of the sort of alumni who were still playing, some of the older women, older than university women, still playing. So there was sort of as a first year university student, I got to play with, some women kind of who had maybe competed on the FIVB and now were just home and training. And so I really kind of got started that way in the summers, and they would have the youth tournaments the Saturday and the adult tournaments on the Sunday. So it was an opportunity okay, I could play both tournaments each day. And so I was just playing a lot and playing with a whole bunch of different partners, different positions. And so I kind of just got exposed to it that way. And so yeah, that was sort of my first experience. And then I went to Under 21 Worlds with Diane Burrows. We split block.
Nice.
And so yeah, that was my first international experience. And I think, I would have been in my second year of university. I finished my second year of university at that time. And for me, it was, we went, we lost every single game, every single set. But it was that experience of okay, I've trained all summer, or I've done all the training that I thought that I needed to do. And, you know, I get there and just being exposed to the different levels, the much higher levels, you know, like how professional all the teams there were, and also being like, I am not a blocker and I never will be a blocker on the World Tour. But, you know, even though, so going and losing, it just had, it was still a great experience for me to kind of see, okay, like, do I want to do this, and what do I need to do to get to the level of these other women? And then and then as I went sort of through university, I made the senior national team. I think I was in my third or fourth year, and then in my final year, I had decided to team up with Liz Maloney and Christine. I was very fortunate that, you know, Christine and I had an agreement that she would let me play a few international events and train beach as the indoor season was going on, and so I was still able to do a little bit of both in my last year, because I knew once I graduated I would continue on with beach volleyball. So and then I think slowly after I had graduated, the beach club came to be a little bit more formal, and they offer that now to a lot of the athletes.
Nice. So how do you think you managed that going back and forth? Was it tough, like going back from sport to sport, and kind of, did any of your teammates ever ask, like, why isn't Heather at practice today, like when you had to miss certain things? Because obviously you were a starter on the team and a leader on the team, so yeah. Was there a lot to manage there, or was it actually a pretty smooth transition?
I think it was definitely exhausting, kind of like just going, like doing both and managing everything, and it wasn't for the whole year. I think kind of like at a point in February I stopped with beach just to focus, you know, as the indoor season winded down. But you know, I was my teammates knew that I wasn't necessarily like skipping practice. I was still practicing just on the beach, and yeah, I think it gave me a little bit of perspective, like allowed me to kind of appreciate both a little bit more, and then yeah, I think if I had to do it, I just remember being so exhausted at the time. But I mean, that was the year that we won OUAs, and I think there was sort of like at the time, at the end of the year, I remember I had sprained my ankle right before playoffs, like really badly, and so, you know, we had a few matches where the team had to kind of play without me, and I think sort of like having to practice without me, and, you know, having the team to kind of like come together without me on the court was sort of like a really great learning lesson, and actually like made our team stronger. So I think there was sort of like things that, like, positives that came out of it.
I don't know about you, Josh. I'm pretty freaking inspired right now.
You think you could have done both? I know this interview is not about you, but we'll ask you one question. Like, you were obviously an OUA player. Do you think you could have managed both in the same season?
I'd like to think that I popularized load management long before Kawhi Leonard popularized load management.
Probably, yeah.
Exactly, right? Same caliber athlete. But I did try to sort of front the load unsuccessfully. The only time that, and I was young, right? I was only 19, 20 years old. I didn't really know what taking a break was, but I'd just come back from Worlds with Garrett, jumped right into the indoor season, played, like, had a good preseason. First game against Mac, tore my shoulder in 2 spots, and that was it for the year. Like, labrum tear, supraspinatus tear, like toast, like done. So no, I don't think I could. Maybe if I was playing libero, but definitely not, swinging and attacking. And I don't know about Heather, but in all of my partnerships, internationally, I got served. So after playing with Garrett and getting a summer of getting served every single ball, and when you don't have a finesse game, you just try and crush the ball as hard as you can every single time. And when you don't have a finesse game in indoor and try to crush the ball every single time, my shoulder blew out.
Load management.
Wished I had a little load management in my life. But, yeah. No, I don't think I could do that. So, we like to finish every episode here with like a little road warrior story. because beach volleyball or volleyball in general is so peculiar, we sort of like to ask different sort of experiences that you've had with the sport that have put you in certain circumstances that you probably wouldn't find yourself in if you played another sport. One of my favorite stories was TJ Sanders, who's a setter for the men's team, said that, you know, he boasted on an Instagram post that they were going to beat Iran, and now every single Instagram post he has like Arabic writing in his feed, and he has to translate it, and it always roughly translates into something like negative, like you look like dog face, or like just something funny, but like you can almost tee it up every single time where TJ will have some sort of like derogatory Arabic saying. It's just because he sort of gloated. So my question is, have you ever been in certain situations, whether it's traveling or, you know, in a peculiar spot that you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened?
My first, it was one of my very first NORCECA events that I went to. And I was playing with Liz Maloney, and Sam Schachter and Cam Whelan were also there. They were partners. And we arrived early, like in small town Mexico. Of course, if anyone's played a NORCECA, you know that the shuttles are terribly unreliable. And so we didn't have a shuttle. We had to get a taxi, and I think the taxi was like a 2 or 3 hour taxi ride, like into the mountains, like into like this really small, sketchy town in Mexico. And anyways, we get there, like it's dead. It's so dead. And anyways, we end up like finally getting a room, getting a hotel. But like Mexico, everyone like comes out for the tournament. So the tournament's packed full of people, but like really there wasn't, like the food was pretty sketchy. You had to be like really careful. And so the very last day, for some reason, Sam and Cam decided to try street meat. And they got so sick. And I don't think you'll interview Cam, so maybe you haven't interviewed him, so he hasn't told this story yet. But he got so sick and had to go to a hospital in Mexico, in like the middle of Mexico, nowhere. And like, I don't know why those guys decided to eat street meat, but that was really.
I don't think Mexico's the time to be fun and spontaneous with your food.
No,
I mean, when you're craving a dog, you're craving a dog.
In Lebanon, we had it was one of my first experiences in like a country where they don't necessarily, like the drivers don't follow like the lines on the road. And I remember like our driver was like up on the sidewalk, and we were like driving like straight on to traffic, like head on into traffic. We definitely got in an accident. At one point we got in an accident and had to stop, and like everybody had to like get off the bus on the way to the venue. I remember there was like the security guards all had like these huge like massive guns, just like walking around the place. I remember there was tons of jellyfish in the sea, and I went in and I got stung, and I came out, and the first aid person looked at it, took my accreditation card, and then like was like, oh, and just took the accreditation card around my neck and just used the side of it to scrape my skin. And then was like, okay, here you go.
You're fixed.
Yeah. That was it. That was it for my jellyfish fight.
Top tier medical service.
Yes, that
in
was
Lebanon.
Best physio. What else? There was another. Oh, so we had a volunteer, and you weren't allowed to leave the venue without official kind of personnel. But we went out with this one, like it was all young kids kind of volunteering, and so this guy, we were going to go out for dinner. He took us to his house first, and it was me and Ben and Jesse, and I think it was just the three of us. And he took us to his house where his family lived, and we went to his house, and then he took us into the bedroom and pulled out his this massive gun from under his bed, and me and Ben and Jesse all took turns holding his gun and taking photos with his guy's gun. Like, so random.
That's good. I like that.
I bet I could find those photos somewhere. But yeah, that was a weird trip. Yeah.
Has anyone been back to Francophone games since?
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't know it was a thing at the time. I was like a last minute invite because Julie Rodrigue, at the time her partner, couldn't go, so I went. I don't know. I think it still happens. Sometimes I get random emails about updates, but I don't know if beach volleyball's a part of it.
Feels like a lot of good stories came from that, but maybe it wasn't the best environment for
high-performance
athletes.
A couple off-the-record stories for sure. We'll get you back on the pod when you're retired and tell the real good ones.
But I remember one of my first times in Switzerland, we lost in the qualifier, but we were still there for the week. And this was when Rich Van Heusen was playing. And so we ended up like biking in the Swiss Alps, had an amazing day, and then we were looking for a public pool. And like, if you know Shad, it's like this like super posh, like all the rich people like in Switzerland go there for their ski holidays, and so the hotels are over the top. And so we were looking for this public pool, and it said it was beside one of this like castle hotel that's up on the mountain. And so we like ride our bikes up there, and somehow we sneak into the spa area. And Rich is like, yeah, this is the pool. This is what we're supposed to go to. And I was like, I think this is the spa attached to the hotel. But somehow we snuck in some like back entrance. And so we got there, and it was quiet, like nobody was there. And so we ended up like stealing these house coats from in the spa, and just hung out in the spa all day with Rich.
What a day!
Yeah. Oh man.
That's what beach players should do: is act like they belong everywhere, especially if you're rich and 6'10" and look like a Viking, and just go wherever you want.
I can't tell you how many main drop buffets I inserted myself into over my career. Yeah. But I think that's great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Look forward to
so
next
much.
time. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
That was
guys.
great.
Thanks for listening, and thanks again to Superstar Heather Bansley for joining the show. Heather joins best friend of the show, TJ Sanders, and super best friend of the show, Ben Saxton, as the 3 Olympians we've had on the show. Sorry, Heather, we overlooked this part in your intro. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review, and remember, the best compliment you can give the show is telling your friends. If you're in the GTA, check out the 9-man major happening this weekend at the Toronto Metro Convention Centre. It's going to be the best 9-man available this season, and the circuit only comes back every 7 years. Stay tuned for new episodes every Friday, and stay excellent, friends.